I almost find reaching the goal is the worst part, because once I've got to the goal, I'm bored. That's my biggest problem. Once I've reached what I thought I was going to get to and I get there, then I'm like, all right. Now what's next? Like it is a bit silly. But it is a feeling that comes along with it. And I think a lot of people probably get that as well.
All right, welcome everybody. So the pre-check has already been interesting. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you here with me today. We're talking with Steve Sommerfeld about how you can stay young, keep playing, and take guilt-free time off. Thanks so much for joining us today, Steve.
Thank you very much for having me, Wade. It's awesome to be on. Like you just said, we've done the pre-checks. That was awesome. We did a chat, it was a couple of weeks ago as well, and that was also good enough that we should have recorded that one. We should have recorded the pre-chat. There's nothing up the nose. I mean, we're looking good for this video.
Exactly.
So if you're listening to this as audio only, you're really missing out. You should tune into the video.
Absolutely. So this should be fun. So Steve is an expert in one of the most dangerous sports in the world, freestyle motocross. As an international rider competing and performing at some of the world's biggest events, he's covered about all the aspects of the FMX world, from a world championship judge, coach, author, TV host, and commentator, to creating and building some of the biggest events for brands like Red Bull and managing the biggest athletes in the sport. That was a pretty good reading of I'm going to give myself credit for that. To read that well after our pre-check, that was pretty damn solid.
Yeah, you got through that one.
I got through that well. I'm getting better.
Yeah.
So
practice makes perfect, right?
Practice makes perfect. So thank you so much for joining us. Just share a little bit about Steve. You and I, we did talk so much, so important. Also, we forgot a lot of it. But tell me a little bit about your journey as far as an entrepreneur, a motocross rider, and just a person who seems to live so much of your life from passion. I know you're going through rehab right now, physical rehab for some injuries and stuff, but share a little bit about your journey and what kind of got you started on making sure that you focused on enjoying life, being young, being passionate, that sort of stuff.
I think it all stems from growing up on a farm. Growing up in Australia, on a dairy farm, I've seen my mum, my dad, grandparents, and the other family as well who worked on the farm. I saw them work themselves into the ground for a long time and for almost nothing. And my old man, he always told me, get an education. That's all that was one of the main things I took from the years and years of being on the farm, going to school, get an education, because farming doesn't pay the bills. Now, whether he meant that as in purely for the financial reason of this is worth nothing, you're going to do the same as us, I don't know. I don't know if I took it the right way. I think he was not so impressed, because I just wanted to ride motorbikes and jump them, and he hated that part. But that's actually what I've ended up doing for my entire working career, is riding a dirt bike, which is not what he wanted, but I definitely got away from the farm. So I always think about that if I was not riding a dirt bike, I probably would have just had a normal job, and I probably wouldn't be very happy doing what I was doing, whatever that may have been. Or, as he said, the other option was you come back to the farm and you milk cows for the rest of your life, and that was not happening. So I think about that constantly. That's like the main motivation of doing what I do, is you don't need to burn yourself out doing something you don't want to do. And to be honest, I think Dad did want to do it. He did love that farm life. But he was also a very good engineer, and I know he wanted to go back to that. But yeah, he definitely got stuck in that farming, what farming is. You can't escape it. Cows need to be milked morning and night every single day. There's no holidays. You just have to do it.
Yeah, it's not a very good 3-day weekend.
Nope. Exactly. There is no 3-day weekend business model in that. I think, as a kid, I don't remember us ever having a holiday more than 3 days, and that would have been only every couple of years. Maybe we might have got 3 days away that we found somebody to come milk the cows enough that we did get away. So I kind of think of it, I did a lot of that work when I was younger, and now I'm running from that as fast and as far away from it as I can get.
You know, it's so interesting. My dad's a successful entrepreneur, and there's different pieces of advice he gave me, like, you know, make sure if you're going to be a professional, fine, be a professional. If you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever, do that. But if you're not, and if you're going to start a business, in his case, he's in the insurance agency industry. So he'd say, start an insurance agency industry. Now, what I took from that was be an entrepreneur, make sure you have a residual income model, which I have a small software company, and do what the heck you like with life. But it's funny to me, like you say, your father had a specific vision. Like, so times my dad will be like, well, you need to have an insurance agency. I'm like, no, I do these. The lesson I took is not the exact lesson you thought you were imparting, but I was paying very close attention and I listened. Yeah. I just took out maybe slightly different pieces of the lesson than maybe he thought he was communicating, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. You took out the parts that probably made more sense for you. Yeah, there was good advice in there, but you have to make it work for yourself. So, yeah.
So share a little, for those people who don't know your background just in writing, because one of the things, I talk with people a lot and they'll ask me about, well, should I do my passion for a living or not? And I think there's varied answers to that. I love beach volleyball. That is my passion. It's still my passion. I chose not to do it for a living, and I've watched some of my friends do phenomenally by choosing it as their living. Yeah. I've watched some of them be miserable by choosing it as their living. And some of it is skill level. Some of it is, could they win prize money? What was your experience and what led you to decide, yes, I'm willing to pursue something that, again, statistically speaking, is not, the odds aren't in your favor?
The odds are definitely not in my favor in this sport. I've seen much better riders come and go much better than I am. But injury is the biggest issue that we'll have in our sport. But the reason for doing it as a passion, it was that point where I went to university. I left the farm straight out of high school, went down to Brisbane, went to university. I didn't really, I did know what I wanted to do, but I knew I couldn't really get there. To be a physiotherapist, you're kind of competing against doctors to get those specific subjects at university. So I kind of sidestepped that. I knew I couldn't do it the traditional way. I went to a private college. I did an advanced diploma in remedial therapies and sports massage. Funny thing was, I realized after that 2 years, I can't stand for 8 hours a day doing that type of it was like manual labor. I might as well go back to the farm at that point. And then again, I kind of didn't know where I would go, and Dad said the same thing. Well, you get a job in what you've just learned, you go back to university, or you come home and milk cows. And so I went through the university, just what else is there? And I thought, when I'm 40 years old, and I've broken every bone in my body, and I just want to sit in air conditioning, who does that? And I thought about, business people do that. So I just did a business degree off of that whim. And from that, then I took on management, and then I went into marketing, and all of those things definitely played a part. But the timeline of university blew out from a few years to 6.5 years, I think. And by the time I finished it, I thought, I've just lived like a uni bum for 6.5 years. I still don't really like what I've studied. And I thought to myself, well, I was relatively good enough in the sport that I was doing. Could I'd already done a few competitions, and I'd entered a couple of pro competitions. In my last semester of university, I went on my first trip overseas, was to China, and did a 10-day show in Suzhou. And I thought, just give this a shot. I'll give myself 1 year. I'm pretty flexible when I give myself goals, but I was like, yeah, I'll try it for 1 year. If I lived like a uni bum doing things I didn't want to do, let's live like a bum and do something I want to do. And within that year, I picked up a fair few shows, did a lot more competitions, picked up some sponsors, not huge paying sponsors, but enough that actually the money didn't mean anything. The money was that little that it barely paid a phone bill. But it was the psychological acceptance that somebody from a company as big as, let's say, Fox Racing, which is the biggest gear brand in our sport, they're sponsoring me with everything. I never had to pay for anything again. And it was that psychological moment thinking, oh, well, maybe there is a chance. And so from that, and I remember every single sponsor that's helped me along, because at every point, it was not so much about the money, but it was all mental. And that's why I decided to give it a shot. And it worked after 1 year, it worked after 2 years, and it continued snowballing. And at every point, I would have been quite happy to say, I've had an awesome time, but this is going nowhere. I'll go back to the real world. But I never got to that point. I always found enough in terms of keeping it as a job, keeping the passion going, and it continued on.
That's so great. There's so many things there. I love just that you started. And our sports, our preferred sports, you with the motocross, me with beach volleyball, I think they're kind of similar. The sponsorship money is usually not huge in the sense of, I can buy a mansion, but it's critical for those that are traveling. And yes, the pride that somebody that sees that you're good enough, that they'll invest in you. And, I explain to people about my entrepreneurial journey. I don't feel like I've been that great of a strategic planner. I've tried a strategic plan. I apparently am not very good at it. So I would think A is going to work, and then C would work out, or G would come out of nowhere. Yeah. And fortunately, I was humble enough to be like, well, I need to do something. Yeah. So I would do that. And yet I do think entrepreneurship, especially if it's that, I think there's a fun brand of it. And I think there's a very drudgery-like brand of it. That's probably horrible grammar there, but just the version where one is, there's a model and I have to follow it. Now, granted, I don't like following models. So everybody's unique, but some people, I see them and they're a more creative type and they're following a model that somebody else created that's successful. And it's like, well, no, but that's
not you.
You wanted to create. That's not you. Exactly. And I have friends that follow models and they do brilliant. Like, wait, I'm happy. I just want to follow a model. I don't want to think in this area. I want to be creative outside of work, which is great. Yeah. But I tell people kind of like you, I just feel every year I'm able to keep doing it, that I'm blessed. And I have enough of a fear, like most entrepreneurs, I do not want to work for someone else. And yet if I had to, it's okay. It'd be all right. But I'd still look for, how can I make that as fun as possible? How can I make that as cool as possible? And you seem to have done that with, the energy you have, your approach. How do you keep the fun involved? Because a lot of people struggle with that. And there's almost this assumption, like you said, and it sounds to me like you rejected the assumption that it has to be drudgery. And at some point you said, no, I'm going to figure this out. How did you do that? Or what was that like for you to make that decision?
Well, I think like now we're talking more about work, and work in the passion of the sport is very different. As the athlete, that's very simple. All I had to do was train every day, or as much as I wanted to, and I only trained doing what I wanted to do. That's why I loved the sport that I did. I'm not a racer. I could not do motocross racing. So for those who are listening, freestyle motocross is more the stunt work. We do the backflips, we let go of the bike, and it's like gymnastics on a motorcycle. Evel Knievel kind of things. There's no way I could be a racer. I don't have the determination. I don't have the motivation to be that fit. And I probably just don't have the skills to be a racer. But being a freestyle motocross rider, it's more about being creative. And I was kind of known as the fat guy getting around. Well, not fat, but I certainly wasn't fit. I hate the gym. But doing what I do is 100% mental, maybe 99% and 1% physical, because you just have to be confident in what you're doing. And that's where, on the athlete side of things, I was very confident in what I could do. And I stayed in my lane and I did what I knew I could do. And, you do some dumb things because that's also the sport. The sport is doing dumb things, but I would try and do the dumb things as smart as possible. But then on the business side of things, this came from actually my best friend, Ryan. And after a couple of years of leaving university, I was riding and I was doing enough shows that I was keeping myself busy. And, we'd go and kick the footy every Tuesday and every Thursday. We'd just kick the footy around a bit. And he's like, why don't you use that business degree? I'm like, well, I don't want to. I just want to ride my bike. That's all I want to do. If I want to make money and, do whatever, I can do that later. I'm young once. And he said, all right, well, why don't you think about, he was brainstorming for me. I wasn't thinking of any of this. And he kind of came up with, well, you did management. Why don't you just manage a couple of riders, see how it goes? And we ended up doing a tour of Indonesia. And funnily enough, I ended up, the guy running it was one of my heroes when I was a kid. He was looking for 3 freestyle riders, and I then took over the managing of finding the other 2. And I took Clinton over there, Clinton Moore and Josh Sheehan. And they were far better riders than I was, like most. But at the end of this tour, we were in the pool in Jakarta, the last show coming up, and I just said to him, what shows do you guys have coming up, or what sponsors have you got? And it was pretty much, they did have some sponsors and they did have some shows, but I thought, for how good you are, like, you should be on another level right now, not doing shows here in Indonesia for peanuts like us. And so with that, I created my business, Invert Management, and within 6 months, or about a year, those 2 guys were in the biggest events, and after a year or 2, I worked with them, and they had a Red Bull helmet for Josh and a Rockstar helmet for Clinton, and having those energy drink helmets, that's kind of like, that's your peak not the peak sponsorship, but in terms of publicity for the fans, that's when you get that helmet, that's kind of the top. And very quickly I realized, okay, I am the athlete as well, not a great one, but I am, but I can help with those managing type roles. And it worked out very well, and both became Red Bull X Fighters World Tour champions, which was fantastic. I'm so glad that I got to be a part of that. And the best part was, it was the best and the worst part. They both outgrew me. I was just a one-man band. I managed to convince my wife to quit her job to come work with me. So it was a 2-man band, but we just couldn't do what they needed. I didn't have those resources like a celebrity agent in America or something like that. So it was the best thing and it was the worst thing. And to be honest, they were my good friends, and I'm glad that they went off and did so much better. But doing that entrepreneurial, starting out, it was so funny. I never expected it. I never could have planned what was going to come of just looking after these 2 guys. At the same time, I was riding with another rider in Australia he was one of the best. He was nearing retirement, and I was there probably 2 or 3 days a week. And he said, I want to build a bike park, but I don't, he didn't know how to sort of get that happening. So he's like, well, I'm the brawn, you can be the brains. Let's see if you can use that uni degree if you think you're so smart. And so the 2 of us, we came up with a really good idea to build a motocross park. And that snowballed into working with the Queensland government, and I think it was 11 councils in the southeast Queensland region, so Brisbane, Gold Coast, and all the other smaller councils. And the government put in $2.3 million and gave us 1,800 acres of land to go build motorbike jumps and tracks and things like that. So like I said, everything snowballed so fast, and exactly what you said before, I'm not a strategic planner either. I thought I was starting with A, and I ended up with C, D, E, G, H, and Z, and I just go with it. Like at the start, I would always say no to everything, and my wife definitely points that out to me very often, that I would say no. And probably with her advice, and probably kicking me up the backside a lot when we were younger, when we first got together, now I'm the absolute opposite, and I'll say yes to everything and try and work it out. And if it works, fantastic. If it doesn't work, whatever. What have I lost? Maybe we've tried something, didn't work. Maybe you've learned a lesson instead. So that's kind of where the entrepreneurship came in, that just try it. Just try it, give it a shot. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Yeah, there's so much in that. First of all, I think it speaks volumes that you're able to help other riders, to be able to, in some way, and I guess it depends who you are. If you're a really insecure person, it would be that you have to put your ego aside. If you're just happy to be there, and that doesn't mean you devalue yourself. You're just like, I'm just happy to be part of this, which it sounds like, great. We'll do this. And I think you're, as an athlete, if you're in tune enough with what's really going on. Look, I have two friends that have become, one's an Olympic world champion, and the other one played at a really high level in college. And I was friends with them, and it's like, well, dude, and in our case, some of it was genes, but they worked harder and everything. So you say, well, good for you, man. Like that's awesome. Tell the two things I think there, and I'm going to ask us to, if it's cool to ask you to go one at a time each. First of all, you seem to have a very strong sense of confidence and faith that things are going to work out. And I think of this sense of, and that's, as you mentioned, the 99%, as far as what you do, specifically the tricks. And I think what you're saying is, a lot of people can execute the trick. They could do, like, if they were doing it over a pool or over, that they could maybe do more flips than you, but then there's landing it, and there's, those parts. So first of all, the confidence, where would you say that's come from for you? And then, if at all, do you cultivate it? Can other people cultivate it? Because the confidence from athletics to entrepreneurship, you seem to have this generic sense that it's going to work out, or at least not be so bad that it's cataclysmic. And that is and it's more than confidence. It's like a trust. It's like not surrender, but it's like a trust factor about the universe, about life, about whatever. How has that been a huge impact for you? And then how can people perhaps cultivate that?
That's a very good question. I wish I had a really good answer for it. That's actually incredibly tough question to answer, and I don't think I could give a perfect answer. And I think my personal journey is my journey. I don't think this would work for everybody. I think everybody will, like you said, it could come down to genes. It could come down to how you grew up. It come down to who your friends are. And like I said, I've got a fantastic wife who kicked my backside if ever I was negative. And she's probably one of the main aspects, if I really was to think about it. But I think there's a few things. So my confidence in what I do riding a dirt bike comes down to, I don't want to crash. So as much as I say I don't want to crash and that I don't want to break bones, I have broken far too many bones. So I'm clearly not good at that either. I'm up to, I think, like 24 broken bones at this point. So clearly that hasn't worked, but the intention is not to crash. So I will, like I said at the start, I will stay in my lane. I will do what I know I'm good at, and I will do that as well as I possibly can. And with that comes confidence straight away. That's your confidence builder. I'm probably like most people, I'm not overly confident. I'm normally a very shy person. So I've completely changed how that works through being the athlete. with a TV host or at the event, and somebody comes up with a microphone and asks you a question, you've got to answer with something. And so over the last 15, 20 years, that has developed to the point that I'm now confident to talk to you and I can answer questions where I don't really know the answer and say I don't know the answer. Probably 15 years ago, I probably couldn't have done that. So that it's just time. It's time. It's working on what you know. I stick to what I know. And if I don't know it, yeah, like you say, the confident part is it doesn't really matter. Life will work its way out one way or another, and things can't be that bad. As long as you're breathing, things can't be that bad that you can't fix it. So I always come back to that. It can't be that scary to do something. Just do it. Probably one other thing is I do think a lot. I think it's probably my biggest strength, and it's probably my biggest weakness. I think far too much. I go into things too deeply that sometimes I'm almost crippled with fear that if I start this, I'm either going to have to go through with it because I've thought about this so much and I've either invested so much time, or I don't invest money. I generally invest a lot of time into something because I want to know this is going to work. So yeah, that brings a lot of confidence. So when I started managing riders, I knew it was going to work one way or another because I'd already thought about it a lot. When we thought about building a motorbike park, it took 5 years. We went through 2 election cycles before the government at the time in power gave us the money. It takes time, but I'd thought about it that much that it couldn't fail. Or if it did fail, I gave it a damn good shot, So yeah, definitely thinking about things a lot and not worrying about if it actually does fail. You'll learn a lesson.
Yeah, I think there's so much to that. There's the staying in your lane thing. And I think that's a self-knowledge thing. It's not, to some people that might sound, oh, now that's limiting. Like, no, to me, if you know who you are within a certain area, you can be very confident. And just to be really clear for the lawyers and everybody else listening, I'm not advocating that you do jumps and flips like Steve. Just hey, I listened to Wade's podcast and now I'm doing backflips. No, not saying that. But I think there's something to, well, and I love your answer in the sense that you acknowledge the other forces. I mean, your wife perhaps pushing you at times and being open and humble enough. And I find there's an approach to life that my parents are from the islands, from Trinidad and Tobago, and there's a little bit more of this sense of not trust the process, but a little bit of almost the Bob Marley, everything's going to be all right. Like it's good. And part of it too is, and this is there's almost a cynicism embedded in it too, but look, life can be kind of deranged and screwed up at some times. Are you really going to spend every moment, therefore, thinking about how bad it can be? Or it can also be beautiful. Like, where are you going to put your attention? And in the overall scheme of things, both you and I, unless I'm mistaken, we're doing better financially than probably about 50, 60, 70% of the world. If you just even know the fact that 6 out of 7 people live in less than $32 a day.
Probably
again, doesn't mean we're happier.
98% of the world at that point, I think, yeah.
Right. And it doesn't mean we're necessarily even happier, which is a whole different conversation. But yeah, so just doing your thing.
Yeah.
So it seems like you have a self-knowledge of doing your thing. And I just that whole idea, and it's talked about, but you seem to be living that idea that everything's either a success or a lesson.
Yeah.
And you can still be smart. And that's the other part. Something you mentioned, the investing your time, not your money. And this, if you're an entrepreneur, please heed this. Don't go pinging the credit card. Oh, there's this new course for $10,000 by this guy or this gal who says it. I've done that. You might have done that. And it's like, no, look, do the stuff anyway. Or at the very least, if they've got a $10 book, read their $10 book, implement the heck out of it for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Because if you won't implement it for 30 days,
you're not going to do it.
Are you really going to implement the $10,000 program? No. And as a coach, I don't want the guy or the gal that says, Wade, here's $10,000, make magic happen. I'm not willing to do the work. It's like, dude, I'm not that good. If I were that good, I'd be a billionaire.
Exactly.
Or multi-billionaire.
Right.
I'd be a magician. Yeah. And so that sense of, yes, you put in the time on something and you get to see. I just remember when I thought I wanted to be an English major because I saw the video with Sting and the Police, Don't Stand So Close to Me. And I liked the book Walden by Henry David Thoreau. And after I'd gotten my bachelor's degree, I signed up for a master's degree level course in literature.
Oh, wow.
And by the second class, I realized, Steve, would you believe this? Apparently they want you to read a lot of books.
Oh, come on. I wouldn't hear of it.
What the? I was like, and this was like 20 something years ago. There weren't a lot of audiobooks around as far as in depth. So I was like, yeah. And I was so sure that I was this deep, and I saw Dead Poets Society. Like, all these people are so inspired. I'm like, yes, that's what I'm doing. No. Within 2 classes, and I made sure I got my no, I don't think I got a refund. So I spent $350 or whatever, $500 in credit hours to realize, no. And it was mainly time. And actually, I guess I didn't invest.
That's actually very funny. Probably not too many people know this anyway, but when I said before that I wanted to be a physio, well, actually, I wanted to do a million things, and I would have done them. But some good friends of mine probably swayed me in different directions as to why I chose where I went to go at that particular time, leaving high school, when nobody really knows what they want. But I actually did get accepted into university for an applied science degree, as that was my first backdoor to get into physiotherapy. Now, the problem was, in high school, I only did biology and maths and whatever, but I didn't do chemistry and I didn't do physics. Of course, being in an applied science degree, trying to backdoor your way in, first classes were chemistry, physics, da-da-da-da-da. Now, I have a pretty good idea. I have a good YouTube idea of chemistry and physics. I can learn very well from YouTube, but certainly not textbook stuff. And within the first lesson, and the first week, I knew I was so out of my depth that I did not have the fundamentals. I didn't have the high school fundamentals of physics at all, or chemistry. I do remember, though, they spoke about gravity on, I think, the second lesson in physics. I'm like, well, I understand gravity. That's where things hurt. If I'm jumping a motorbike and I'm coming down, I got a rough idea of the gravity and the trajectory that I'm going to hit the ground. As to maybe how many bones I'll break, but that's not going to pass that particular course. So within the first 2 weeks, I rang mum and dad. I must have rang them probably 5-6 times. After each lesson, I said, I can't do this. And, it's that mentality of, no, you've chosen it, you've been accepted it, you're going to do it, you will do it. And I knew I couldn't. I knew my skill set was not at that level. And I did quit within the first 2 weeks of that applied science degree. And that's how I ended up at the private college at very short notice, probably the week after. And that was actually incredibly difficult to quit something, giving it only, I think I gave it 10 days. I had 2 weeks to quit without having to pay for the whole semester. And I don't think at that point I'd ever quit anything. I'd always done whatever I said I was going to do. I mean, I was only 18 or probably 17. So that's not really a life story, is it? But you never quit. That was always what I knew. And it was the hardest decision to quit, but I knew I would have completely failed and wasted 6 months of my time in subjects that weren't going to be of any use to me for where I thought I was heading. They probably would be very useful now, but at the time, it made no sense. So I am glad that I made that decision to quit. So that's probably another lesson. So if you are listening to this episode, this podcast, and the reason you would be listening here to Wade every week and every episode as an entrepreneur, probably another lesson I would say is if you know you are that up against the wall, it's not the worst thing to quit. there are other things to do as well. So I don't normally say quit things, but I knew I wasn't going to do that. Just as you said, you weren't going to go be a volleyball professional. So be it. I played rugby league with what turned out to be some very good rugby league players when I was younger, and they went on to do incredible things. I couldn't do that. Like, you got to know what you can do and you got to know what you can't do. So, yeah.
Well, I think two things are interesting. One is that you went from I'm going to be a physio to I'm going to be a physio. I'm going to spend a lot of time with physios, perhaps. So one way or another, apparently there was something there. If we were mystics, we'd say that somewhere in your cards there were physios. Absolutely. We just didn't know exactly where they were going to be. But actually, you know what? I'm going to ask you to make a point out of this, because you just did, but I'm wondering if you could tighten it. Because you just, to me, what I just wrote down as you were just speaking, you gave the difference between quitting intelligently, quitting due to self-knowledge versus failing. And, you know, I don't know your exact age. I'm 50. Our generation, although I think we're kind of close enough where we're told, especially as males, you don't quit. That's what weak people do.
Yeah, and that's the worst word. The weak people. That's the worst part about it, is you're weak if you do it, and that's the part that stops everybody in their tracks. You know, if the thought is
so,
there to
what
quit.
Was it that you saw? So if someone were listening, because again, let's think entrepreneurship. Because sometimes, you know, I was talking with somebody yesterday. One of my friends has been trying to do an entrepreneurship. Well, actually, I was interviewing a gentleman who's a friend. And he mentioned how he's a podcaster, but how he was an entrepreneur, and then he stopped doing it. He said, look, I'm not a great entrepreneur. I'm a great tactician in the coaching that I do. I'm not a great business person. And I was sharing with him that a friend of mine had just said, you know, she was so disappointed because she might be going back to a job, but here's the job. The job's going to pay her way more than she was making, 4 days a week, work from home, all the support she needs with brilliant people. I'm like, that's not failure.
She's kicking goals with both feet.
Yes. So what was it that you would say if somebody, but sports, life, entrepreneurship, what was it for you that you saw? What's that difference between quitting because you gave, or the difference between quitting intelligently and giving up? Because I think one is something where we say, I failed myself. I gave up. I wanted X. What was that difference for you?
I could probably say I've done all of those. I've done everything. Everybody has. Everybody's had those stories, you know. And to quit intelligently, it's probably the best thing you can do. Like, that's where you sit down and really look at yourself and go, am I made out for this or not? And I wasn't made out for it. And that was one of the better lessons that I learned about myself was, you know, I don't need to bang my head against the wall on something I know I can't do. What is the point? And I think about that when I take on different projects, and I know I take on too many different things. And probably like what you said about the friend you were talking with yesterday, where they thought, okay, I'm going to get out of it because actually I'm a terrible businessman, but I'm better at tacticians. Well, I'm probably the same. If the only way to, what's the word? Like if the result is to have money, I failed. Absolutely, I failed 100%. But I never did everything that I've done. I have never, ever really done for money, just enough that I get by. I look at success is if I'm happy doing what I want to do. That is my version of success, but everybody has a different version. So for the lady who thought she quit it and then went and got a real job and worked 4 days a week, but she was at home and she got paid more money, I would love to take that. Like some days I think I should just go get a real job because life would be so much easier. And that's also one part I want to go to. I want to have an easy life, but I know I keep coming back to what is fun. Like what gets me out of bed in the morning? Like, why do I do what I want to do? And I just maybe I make life difficult. That's just what I do. But it's making life difficult in things I want to be involved in. So yeah, I could go do the easy thing. I could go make money, but I've quit the real world, intelligently quit the real world, because I want to do what I want to do in my own little world. And I love what I do, and that's where I want to stay. So as long as I've got a roof over my head and we've got enough money to buy some food. Actually, sorry, if I've got enough money to put diesel or petrol in the car or the van or the motorbike, that's my success. As long as I can get on a bike and go somewhere, then I'm stoked. So yeah,
that's awesome.
I guess to answer the question, quitting, failing, both are acceptable. It's the connotation you put to it. And like you said, when people say you're weak, it's not weak. It's the opposite of weakness. I think it's a strength to realize when you can't do something or you're wasting your time doing something and it's making you miserable. What's the point in being miserable?
Yeah, I love something that Wayne Dyer said. He told this story about a friend of his who's a doctor who was just miserable. And the doctor, let's say, was 40 years old. And he says to the guy, well, why don't you do something different? You've made enough money. You're doing well. And the guy says, well, no, I decided when I was 18 years old, I decided I was going to be a doctor. Yeah. And Wayne says, well, would you go to an 18-year-old for career advice? He says, well, no. He says, well, that's what you're doing. An 18-year-old told you what to do, and you went with that.
That's
so to go with
true.
that. Oh, yeah. I thought that was so brilliant.
That's true.
So one thing you said I'd love you to go into, because we talked about this in the pre-interview, is
you remember the pre-interview?
The idea,
I've forgotten it. It was awesome, but I've forgotten it all.
It was awesome. I put it this way, I take notes. So this is why I write down things that sounded intelligent. So you said some things that sound intelligent. That's why we're here.
Wow,
you know.
You've done well to write down something that sounded intelligent from my mouth. That's impressive.
So a lot of the times, and even a lot of the people I talk to, we talk a lot about, filtering in the sense of not throwing your energy into too many opportunities or too many things, because you can wear yourself thin. Yeah. And then there's the flip side of the saying yes to the opportunity, the not knowing if you can do it, but being so excited, figuring it out, those sort of things, because that's something you seem to have done well. What's that been like? Like, how have you done that? And what do you, and who is that? Because it's not for everybody. It's not for the squeamish. Some people can't do it. What's that been like for you? And how does that work? Or how would you try to explain that to somebody that maybe, how do you explain it to a kindergartner?
Well, it's in progress. The answer to that is I'm completely in progress. So I'm 37 at the moment. And I might not have an answer for you until I am 50. I definitely run myself thin, but I always have the end goal of where I know I want to go to. I know what I want to do. And if you look at the day-to-day, it can get overwhelming. And sometimes it does. Sometimes I have to sit back. And actually, the reason I found your podcast, because I really only work when I want to work. I don't even advocate for 4 days working. I would advocate for 1 day if you want to, or take the next 3 weeks off, or whatever works for you. But I found your podcast, and I did like the idea of advocating for that for the general populace, because it will help everybody. I do run myself thin, and sometimes I know I probably should work a lot harder, probably would make my life easier, but in those times, if I'm not feeling it, I'm not going to deliver on what I want to do. I'm not going to come at it with the energy that I know I should, or that I know I want to give. And as soon as you do that, you do become miserable. And, I keep coming back to, it's just work. So I don't need to feel miserable about work. I want to feel good about what I do. I'll do it in its good time. So how do you manage that? I think that's up to the individual. If you're somebody who likes to schedule things, I know that I don't schedule anything. I hate having a schedule. If I have a schedule, I feel more stressed. Whereas I know people feel stressed without that schedule. And there's all these parts in between, and there's probably people far more on the extreme than I am. So I decided I know where I want to go. I at least know the aspects in which I can work to make those things happen. They will get done. It just takes time. So patience is probably the key to fixing that. And whether you take on 2 projects, whether you take on 1 project and do it well, or take on 10 projects, stuff around for a while, which I'm guilty of. But I do know that, I don't know how many I've got on at the moment. There's probably, 15, 20 different things I'm working on. But I know some of those things can't happen for another 2 or 3 years. Or there's probably one, before I came to Europe. So right now, just to give you a little bit of context, I am in Poland right now. I've been living in Germany the last 8 years. I came here for 2 months. I came on this trip in 2014 for 2 months to judge at 5 World Championship rounds of Freestyle Motocross. 8 years later, I'm still living in Europe. But before I came here, I was within about a month of pulling the trigger on the next business at the time, which was to do trail ride tourism, taking riders from Australia and going to the jungles of Indonesia, where I did that first tour with Sheeny and Clinton. And actually, this almost circles all the way around. One of the best days I ever rode a dirt bike, one of my best days ever in my life. We went to the very first show in Indonesia. It was raining flat out. It did not stop raining. It was torrential rain. The soccer stadium where we were supposed to do the show was completely bogged. The locals in that area knew that motorcycles were going to come and that we were going to build jumps. And so there was a massive riot. So I think it was a day before we got there, they had army bulldozers and excavators. That's what they were going to build the course with. And as far as the story goes that I was told from the promoter, there were bombs put on the bulldozers. There were many, many threats to the police, the government, to everybody involved. This show will not happen because we don't want our soccer field to be destroyed. Wow. And then we landed, and then we were told this news, and we thought, oh, okay. So across the road, the promoter was fully stressed out, as anybody would be. First event of his 7-event tour. Where do you go? And luckily there was a block of land directly across the road from the soccer stadium. So with the Australian track builders that were there as well, and the son that was riding in the motocross, they just built a motocross track, just kind of like old school. Like, when you're a kid and you've got a BMX and you dig a hole in the ground and you make a little jump out of the ground and then into the ground. We did what we could do. And the mayor was so happy that we got this show done. And despite everything, it happened. And it was completely full. There was so many people came. It was just the most unreal thing. So he said, to say thank you, please, everybody, can you come to the mayor's compound and we'll have a Sunday lunch together. And we got there and we had the most amazing food in this town of Malang. And at the end of the lunch, he said, actually, I like motorcycles as well. And he just, clicked his fingers, and 3 guys pushed out these enduro bikes from KTM, and they had the most, like the aftermarket parts that were on. These bikes would have cost $20,000, maybe $30,000 each, and then imported into Indonesia, where the taxes alone would have doubled the price. He's like, would you like to go for a ride up to that volcano? Okay. So, okay, just go back to your hotel, grab your helmets, and we'll go for a ride. In the 30 minutes we went back to the hotel, came back, there was 100 bikes. This, like a motorcycle club, he must have rang somebody, and this whole motorcycle club turned up to the mayor's compound. We had a police escort through the town. We got to, like where the forest started, and we went off. So the mayor was riding his bike. Josh and Clinton, they were on a couple of other pretty crappy bikes. I was on one of the mayor's bikes as well. And the reason I had a problem was it had all of these aftermarket parts with automatic clutch, automatic gears, automatic this, that, and the other. But the bike broke down in the middle of the jungle. It was only Josh, Clinton, and myself riding. We had the guide in front of us, so we were following him, and I was the last rider because, in theory, I had the best bike. No. There was too much technology, and the bike just could not handle the heat of Indonesia. And so my bike stopped. Josh and Clinton continued, and I just heard their bikes disappear. And I'm in the jungle on my own with a bike that's not going. After about an hour, the sun's going down, and it went behind the mountains. And after about 2 hours is when I was starting to really stress out that I'm stuck here for the night. Like, I don't know where the hell I am. Like, the jungle is so thick. I'm looking at the water, in this little stream going by, and I thought, I wonder if I can drink that. You start thinking of survival instincts. And after about 2.5 hours, another guide, the tail, just this guy came along and found me. And we're just standing there looking at this bike. He's speaking Indonesian, Bahasa Indonesian. I'm speaking English. We can't communicate with each other than to say, bike's broken, won't start. After a while, it finally did start. We ended up, we got there, and by the time I got to the top of the volcano, Josh and Clinton, the mayor, everybody else, they were sitting in these hot springs with fireflies buzzing around them, eating hot potatoes. I don't know why they had hot potatoes in a hot spring, but they did. And they were just having a great time. And I'm like, I thought I was going to die tonight. Like, I had no idea what was happening. It was so surreal. But that entire ride, everything that happened on that was one of the best days of my life. And this probably also circles around to why I think, like, as bad as things can get, as bad as it felt at the worst point when you see the sun going down and you think, well, I'm here for the night with the mosquitoes and whatever, I will remember that day for the rest of my life. That was unbelievable. We went back there the next year, and unfortunately the mayor was not there at that point in time, but he said, I know the guys are back. You're free to take my bikes. Go for another trail ride. We'll organize somebody to take you. And so we did. We went on a trail ride, and it was another awesome experience. And so that's what I was about to do. 1 month before I came to Europe in 2014, I'd done the whole business plan. I had everything lined up, from insurances to travel agents, how everything was going to work. I was probably within about a month of starting it. And I ended up in Europe. And I had to, like I said, I was here for 2 months. That was the plan. Then I was here for 5 months. Then I was here for a year. And then it turned out that I could be a freestyle motocross rider and do very well living in Europe. I'm living the dream. I'm traveling to every country, getting a call out of the blue on a Wednesday. Can you come to Spain? Okay, I'll see you on Saturday. And I'd get in the van and I'd drive. I had to put that business plan that I'd put so much time and effort into, that's still on the back burner. I will do it. That business will happen, but I now know that won't happen until some point in my life where things change and I want to go back to that, or so it's quite funny. Like, all these things all link back up, and I'm sorry that was a very, very long story, but I think that those points where you realize yeah, you've put the work in, but maybe it doesn't work for now. Or I came to Europe for 2 months. I've now been here for 8 years. It just happens, you know? So you just kind of go with it. I started with A, I ended up with Z.
Yeah. No, I love that story because it's so, a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people do entrepreneurship and just life to have these experiences. And you have some people talk about, and I think there's truth to this, that it's not so much that people want work-life balance, like in some they just want to know that they're living. They just want to know, like as I've told people, if you get in, no matter how many days you work in a week or don't, if you get in your time doing your hobby, spending time with the people you love, then you feel like, okay, it was a good week. And it might not have looked a certain way. And definitely to your point about multiple projects, I think so many people can relate to that. And if you're an entrepreneur, I had a gentleman who's a coach, and I said, look, I've got literally like 10, 15, 20 projects. He's like, wait, you just got to decide what's the project you're working on now, and be open to the fact that there will be times when you didn't think that this one's about to come up, but somebody's like, boom, are you ready to do a blah, blah, blah? And you're like, that's my 7th project. No, now it's your first project. And that can be beautiful. That can be life. That can be this sense of the play, that really there is this sense of, okay, I'm not sure what's happening next. And not a dangerous, not a crazy, and again, depends on your brand of vodka, so to speak, whatever, how much you want, but you can have that. And to your point, there can be fun in that uncertainty as opposed to stress. And something else I heard, I thought, it's, of all people, I was listening to something on, there's a clip came up with 50 Cent. And I thought it was about to be something about rap, and I listened to rap too, but he was talking about superstardom. He said, look, he says, sometimes you're at the top of your game and you've put in the work and you're thinking, it's my time, it's supposed to happen now. He says, but it doesn't happen yet. And his explanation, he said, is what happens is you now need to go through about another 6 months, year, depending on who you are, where you don't get the external validation, and you need to toughen your resolve that I'm doing this anyway.
Exactly.
And you need to not give a damn about the approval. He says, then when you reach that, and he said in far fewer words, but he said, then when you reach that point, he says, then it comes, because you thought you were ready, but you weren't ready.
Absolutely.
And I was just like, wow.
I totally agree with that. And it's almost like the time comes and goes and you don't realize until after the fact as well. Like, you've got to do that work. And sometimes I would say, on that side, and as well on the other, that you do the work, the things happen, but you don't realize how good it was until you've actually done it. And then you sit back and go, holy crap, this worked. Okay, we got there. Like, perfect. And I almost find that disappointing. I almost find reaching the goal is the worst part, because once I've got to the goal, I'm bored. That's my biggest problem. Once I've reached what I thought I was going to get to and I get there, then I'm like, all right. Now what's next? You know, like, it is a bit silly, but it is a feeling that comes along with it. And I think a lot of people probably get that as well. Like, so I also have my own podcast just on freestyle motocross. And one of the best interviews I did was with a good friend of mine, but also one of the best riders to ever ride a bike, Levi Sherwood. And I asked him about why he retired so young and at the top of his game. He was just so stylish, and you know, every time he turned up to an event, you think, oh, he could win this. Like, this is Levi's to lose almost. And I said, why did you quit? You won X Games, you won X Fighters, you won this, you won that. You've done everything. And he's like, yeah, exactly. Like, I won it. What's the point winning it again? I get bored. So he retired. And so then he went and built his own motorcycle. He, from the ground up, he has not done an engineering course, but he built his own bike frame, everything, 3D printing, all the CNC machining, blah, 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 blah. He's learnt how to use engineering software and all that sort of stuff. And so that was the first podcast I did with him about 1.5 years ago. I did one with him a few months back as kind of the follow-up. And he said, yeah, well, I've built that first motorbike. I have revised it because I realized when I finished it, there were so many things that actually could have been better. So I have done it a second time, but he said, I'm actually bored of that now. Like, he said, I don't know, maybe I'll build a road bike, maybe I'll build a car, or, I don't know. And I felt the same when he said that. There are parts, not with riding, but there are other parts in my life where I just do get bored. And as soon as you reach that goal, move on. And I think it's a tough part for a lot of people once you get to that point to stick with it. So there is the sticking with it through the process where it's hard as hell and you don't see any results at all. And it feels like you've wasted 2 years. And I've felt like that for 4 years now on many things. But also the other part is when you get to it and then to stick with it once you've made it to the top and then to maintain what you've built, that's also very difficult and definitely a skill a lot of people need to work on.
Well, yeah, and I think though you nailed it. I think it depends on the person. Some people win one championship in sports and they want to win 10. Yeah. Some people win one and they say, "Wow, I'm thankful to have done one." And I think that's the play part, and I think that's the part that human nature. Some people call it divine discontent. Some people call it immaturity. So you can frame it any way you want, but this sense of, well, if I've done something. And if the joy was in the journey of discovery, like the way I watch my son do this with athletics sometimes, is something I would do. Is I would enjoy, like when I'd play volleyball or basketball, like if I'm shooting a free throw, okay, what if I do this? What if I do that? And so I got him this course with Steph Curry teaching how to shoot. And of course, mechanics are flipping perfect. And he looked at it for a little bit. He's like, yeah, that's good. He's like, but I want to, and he didn't know how to say it. So at first I'm like, what is he? I mean, he's better than Steph Curry. Like the ego comes in like, well, he thinks he's better than Steph Curry. Come on. And then I realized, no, he wants that whole journey. And it's almost like the videos are taking the joy away from him. If it becomes that, like, in other words, it's almost like, it's like, okay, great. Watch that video once, get some ideas, and now go do your own thing. And I think that's the part. You're probably the first person who has lucidly explained something to me that I so resonate with. Is I tell people I don't plan more than about 3 to 6 months into my future. And I'm not trying to brag. I'm not trying to say I'm irresponsible, but I've overplanned and found it didn't turn out the way I wanted. So it was almost like, okay, it's like the insignificant numbers at the end of a fraction. And then I've done things where I've just been open and yes, something comes up. And of course, have I built skills? Do I do my best to do what I say what I'm going to do? Finish what I start. If I change my mind, say, hey, you know what? I thought I was going to do X. Now, you know what? Because of these variables, I don't do that. And do I even at the beginning try to be really clear about, okay, hey, here's what, like if I was told my kids, here's what I'm promising you. If I ever use the word promise, that means I'm going to move every mountain possible to make that happen versus if I say, I think so, or let's see. And so 90% of my answers are, I think so, let me see, it depends, let's check and see. And then that gives me the freedom to then say, but the other piece you said that I thought was just so huge, and I watch this with kids with sports, I know you've seen this, is once a person gets a bug for something, you can't stop them. But if they don't have it, you can't make them.
Exactly.
And so if you have a bug for something, and if it's that opportunity, you say, I've got a bug for it. And if you want to really almost go left brain and say, well, wait, is it responsible? Okay, well then make sure 4 days a week you're earning your income or whatever it is. Make sure you earn your income and budget the time and say, but yes, I'm going to give myself 10, 15, 20 hours a week and some money for medical bills if you're doing motocross or whatever to make sure you can do that.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of medical bills, like I'm sitting here right now, I'm in a rehabilitation clinic in Poland, and I've always, on the smart side of me, has always had savings in case something goes wrong. And things have definitely gone wrong a lot of the time. But I've always had private health insurance in Australia, even though in Australia we have a free healthcare system. I've always had private health anyway because of the nature of the risk involved in what I do. And so now that I live outside of Australia, of course, you have to have health insurance anyway. And especially in Germany, you have to have health insurance, no matter what. There is no question. That's just the German health system. So either you have a German government private health insurance coverage, or like what I have, which is just an international coverage. At the moment, I'm having quite the fight with my insurance company, and I'm really looking at possibly having to pay for this 3 weeks in rehab myself if they don't cover it. At that point, it is what it is. I've saved for things like that if it gets to that point. I don't want it to. I really would hope my insurance covers it, but if it is what it is, we will see. So yes, I always have my backup plan of what I feel comfortable with. If I know things go terribly pear-shaped, I've at least got something to fall back on. Some people say they perform better not having that backup, but knowing I have something in the back means I could do what I did in the sport that I wanted to do. It means I have the flexibility to go 3 weeks of not working if I didn't want to, but I knew for the next 6 months I would be working. I can work 12 hours, 18 hours a day if I have to. And especially when we do events, we are doing so in next Saturday, we have our first event of 2022. We've now gone 2 years with COVID, with all of the events being cancelled. So we will be in Munich, in Germany, with Night of the Jumps. And it's a Saturday event, but we will be building from Friday, I think 5 o'clock in the morning, build all the way through Friday until probably 2, 3 in the morning. Go to bed. I won't be doing that, but our crew will be. I'll be there looking after the riders. Then we start the next morning at about 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. The show goes until probably the end of the autograph session would be midnight again. And then you have a shower. Then it's time for the after party. So my wife's job, I'm the rider manager at the World Championships. I do a lot of other things, but as long as the riders arrive at the venue, then in terms of that part of my job, it's done. Then it's her part. Then she looks after the riders to make sure they get on the bus, that they have what they need, they're at the right place at the right time to do their freestyle run and to get to the autograph session. The next part of her job is then to make sure there's the vodka and Red Bull at the after party, the beers are ready, and all that sort of stuff. So the job goes until about 6 o'clock in the morning. So when we have an event on, over 48 hours, we've probably been awake for 36 of them, if not closer to 40. So yeah, there may be times when I don't feel like doing any work, but there are definitely the times when you just have to get in and do it. Or, we did a Red Bull event, which was 10 days building jumps, just sitting in dozers and excavators and turning a wasteland into one of the best events ever. And we didn't need to work that much. We wanted to. We said we were going to build the best damn thing we could do. Man, it broke us. We were broken by the end. From before sunrise to well after midnight, we were building jumps. And when that event happened, it was just like this. You were so relieved. And also a little bit, you couldn't believe what you've just built. It was like, that was impressive, but I don't want to do that again for another few months. I'm done.
That's awesome.
I'm finished. I need a little bit of a break now. So it is cool to see those things come to life. But yeah, it's tough question.
Well, and that's why I think, and I'm going to, as we're coming to the close of this, we were going to talk about taking guilt-free time off. And what I'm just seeing in general is, if you've done what you need to do, if you're having the time, you're honoring the commitments that you promised to, then taking time off is not that big of a deal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is something I see a lot in everybody. I'm also guilty of it sometimes. Not too much because I really don't like work. But people generally will just sit at the computer or they'll go to work because they have to. But that is just not, what's the word? It's not efficient. You're not using your time well. And so I always come back to, am I having fun? If I'm not having fun, why bother? If it's something that I've committed to and it's not fun, that is actually a very tough point to get to. I will get through and I will do the work and I will make it happen. But I will learn the lesson from, okay, maybe don't say yes to that one. We finished that project or whatever it might be. But there will be times when even coming up to this event in Munich in 1.5 weeks, probably 3 weeks ago, I was probably not very interested in taking an email or a phone call about what we had to do because I've spent the last 2 years. This event has been postponed 5 times or 6 times since the start of COVID. And so every 3 months, we're talking with the promoter or we get news from the government. No, we've got to cancel it. So we have worked on this event for 2 years for nothing. And now we're so close to the finish line. I almost got to the point of, can we just not talk about it for like a day or two? Like, we know what to do. I know what I need to do. It will get done. And there was a little bit of guilt in that feeling because I knew I ran out of energy. But that's probably very reasonable to think after 2 years of constant postponement and working. Okay, we've got new riders, we've got new teams, we've got this, we've got that. Is everybody able to bring all the technical equipment? Is the music guy still on? Is the security team, do they still have a job? Like, everything can change very quickly. And there are the times when you have to take time off and be guilt-free about it. And I am a little bit guilty of that, but I don't pick on myself too much about it. Sometimes I do, but I try not to. And I try to realize when I'm at that point to then just take a step back and just chill out, and it'll work out.
Thank you, man. Just so much. And it's funny. It's not always easy to explain to people or reverse engineer things. I find a lot of people are used to the packaged coach's answer. Well, that's because the packaged coach is selling you a coaching program. It doesn't mean they're a bad person, but sometimes they don't know the answers and they're just giving you a lot of bullet points to make it look like they know the answers. And entrepreneurship shifts. Anybody who tells you that it's going to be a certain way is either naive or full of nonsense.
I think I read something actually the other day about that. It's like it's either somebody who has already done it or they will never do it. If they've got the answers, they've probably already done it and they're doing just fine and they're probably not even involved in it anymore, or they're talking about it and they probably won't get to the end. And I'm, like I said, if you were to judge me by making money, I've failed. Absolutely. But if you were like I said before, I judge it by my lifestyle, and my lifestyle is I get to choose where I want to be almost at any one point in time. And I feel that is my goal, and I have succeeded at it. And so that's enough for me. And there's enough money to pay the bills. And after that, I kind of don't care, So, so I think what you were saying just then with the entrepreneurs and the different bullet points, I've probably given the worst possible answers because I can't give you direct answers. I don't know what those direct answers are because everybody's so different. I'm just giving you what I have found.
Well, and that's true. And it's funny, I already just slightly shifted our title for when I put in the episode which to me, it sounds like you've done is created the freedom to be able to play
Yeah,
and stay young and enjoy the process.
absolutely. Yeah,
because I think that's so huge.
I would say, because some may, and I have heard it a bit, that, oh, you're so lucky to travel the world and do what you're doing. Well, it wasn't luck. Okay, there is luck. There's absolutely luck, but I put myself in a position where the luck could happen. There's many things that I've probably missed. But yeah, I've always wanted to put myself at least in the position, if luck was to come along, maybe I can take advantage of it. A lot of the times it doesn't work out. Like I said, for the last 4 years, it depends. If we had this conversation a couple of months ago, it probably would have been a very different conversation. I have now just had my hip replacement surgery done 4.5, nearly 5 weeks ago. So I'm 37. I now have a hip replacement like I'm an 87-year-old man. And the last 4 years, I've been weighing up how I approach this last injury that I've had. And it was a career ender. And I never wanted that to happen. That's been the big one as Steve Sommerfeld, the athlete, compared to the whatever else I do in life. I never wanted to quit riding a bike. That's what I want to do. And realizing that with constant pain, you cannot do what you want to do, that's a very tough pill to swallow. So yeah, if we had this conversation 2 months ago, I probably would have been in a different frame of mind, and I probably would have given different answers. I probably would have given you the same answers, but I would have been a bit unhappy at that point in time. But I've had the surgery now. I'm feeling better day by day, and it kind of feels like life is coming back again. And the thing that I found out of all of it was it will get better. Like, as bad as it was and as pissed as I was, am I allowed to say that on this podcast? I swear on mine, yes. And only a little bit, but it does kind of sum it all up, I think. I wasn't happy with what had happened, but at least there is a second chance, and I've got a few ideas. I've thought about. So this is coming to another idea of another project. I want to get back into doing dumb things, but I may have to do that with more wheels and maybe with a roll cage. I think they say with age comes a cage. So I haven't put it out there yet as to what I want to do, because, again, I want to think of everything that's going to go into this. I will do it, but I haven't worked out the finer points that I'm confident enough to say what it is just yet. But that will come. Other people, and I've spoken with other people about this, and they're like, just do it. Just get in and do it. And yeah, that works perfectly fine for you. But that doesn't work for me. I need to be 100% that this is going to work. So yeah, I try and, like you said, if the title of the thing has changed, perfect, because it is about being creative. And I love being creative with my lifestyle. That's probably more what it comes down to. I just want to do whatever I want to do. And if I can make that happen, if I'm at a point where that happens daily, perfect.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And I love the stories, the digressions, because I think that's where people can anchor to things. Where can people learn more about you, your work, and then also even if they want to start looking at freestyle motocross? And we'll put all the links in here.
I wouldn't recommend getting into it, but if you want to watch freestyle motocross, yeah, I mean, so I have a podcast called Riders Lounge Podcast, and very quickly, this is another digression. I'm sorry about that, but I've realized that the podcast is not just a podcast. It's almost become an audio magazine in a way. I've written for magazines for many, many, many years, and I feel like the podcast world, the audio, tells so much more than what the written version of a magazine could. And And what I thought I was starting my podcast as just simple interviews, just like this, back and forward, has turned into so much more. So I have the Riders Lounge podcast. We talk about freestyle motocross. I do work with the World Championships, Night of the Jumps. It's based in Europe, but of course, we go all around the world. So we do have a few events this year, nightofthejumps.com. But I try and get involved in almost every event, every tour that's going around in the sport. I like to keep my ear to the ground on it all. For me personally, I suppose stevesommerfeld.com. I probably haven't updated that website in a little while because of where I want to go with this next venture. I've purposely neglected the athlete side of things because I do have a bit of an idea, and I want to rebuild it later. So at the moment, you can find out what I have done in the past. I have been on a 4-year break with this hip problem after a big crash, but I do want to come back with something different. So stevesommerfeld.com, nightofthejumps.com, or the Riders Lounge podcast if you want to find it wherever you can find your podcast. So we are there talking about, and again, the funny thing is about the podcast, after listening to what you do, and I listen to a lot of other business podcasts, and funnily enough, like what you said before we started, I think before we started this, in the pre-interview, you were talking about like the 3 avatars of who listens. And actually a lot of people listen to my Freestyle Motocross podcast, not so much about the sport, but a lot are probably my age and older, and they want to know more about the lifestyle. How did people get to that position? And a lot of it comes with the business side of things. So I've deviated again from the sport to the business inside a sport podcast. So yeah, it's every day. Again, like you said, I started with plan A, and even on a podcast, the plan A should have been very simple to stick to, and that completely blew out.
Well, yeah, you know what I found, like with my podcast, you can only talk about productivity.
Yeah, exactly.
And delegation so many times. You got to, at some point, there's got to be something more to it that's a 1 degree off.
That's right.
And so that's where I find the overlap is so great. Steve, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Really looking forward to sharing this. And for those of you all listening, as always, look forward to helping you impact more people and make more money in less time. Do what you do best so you can play like Steve plays and enjoy your family, your friends, and your life. Thanks for listening.